Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar sponsored by the Wisconsin Department of Revenue on temporary event reporting. We're going to give a few minutes here for people to get into attendance. Our numbers are still climbing as people enter the room, so we'll just give it a few moments here. While we do that, we'll do some housekeeping to introduce a few people. Myself first, my name is Mike Udy. I am the Section Chief of Business Tax Operations for the Department of Revenue, which is the section that handles temporary events. Also on the line helping us is Jordan from our customer service area to take care of any GoToWebinar or technical issues that you may have. And also on the line is Kelly Neeson, the supervisor of the Sales and Withholding Unit, which handles temporary events at the Department of Revenue. And Lisa and Mandy are online to answer questions that you may have during the webinar. You may put questions in the question area of the GoToWebinar app, and they will be answering them as we go along. Quite often, we will get to an issue, so later in the program, you might want to see if it's available before you ask your question, but certainly go ahead at any time and ask your question. There are also handouts available that you can download for this event and take notes on if you like, or for future reference. I will also mention we have another webinar coming up in May 10th at 2 p.m. Central Time. That would be also available for individuals to sign up and take part in that event if you're so interested, or if you want to refer somebody to that. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with this morning's presentation about temporary event and operator reporting. So first, we really need to define what a temporary event is. It's an occasion, activity, or function where merchandise is sold or traded, or taxable services are provided. One easy way to look at this is if it's not a business storefront that's licensed by the city, it very well might be a temporary event. Events may be one day, consecutive days, may occur on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. So they can be repetitive, they can be at the same spot, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Some examples of what a temporary event are: farmers markets, roadside stands, flea markets, swap meets, gun, coin, stamp, car shows or trade shows, state and county fairs and carnivals, craft shows, art festivals, fundraising events. Basically anywhere where multiple merchants are being brought together and are vending and selling product. Now, I said multiple, but really a temporary event can be one person. And we do get some of those each year where one person established themselves in a temporary event and reported that event. So we're here to talk about operator reporting, but it's also important to note the vendor requirements. Individuals and businesses selling at temporary events must have a seller's permit if they sell taxable goods or services and do not qualify for an exemption. We're going to talk about the exemptions in a minute. There are exemptions, and there are reasons why people are not required to have a seller's permit. Vendors should report their Wisconsin seller's permit identifying information for the business, not the sales representative attending the event, if that's different. I recently did some webinars for farmers markets, and a good example of this is if the farm is a business and they send their daughter to sell the corn, they should not report their daughter as the vendor. They should report their business or the farm as the vendor. So even if you go to sell for somebody else, it's the business that should be reported. The contact could very well be that daughter or that individual that's selling. I want to stress to you that a seller's permit only begins with 456. All Wisconsin seller permits begin with 456. 600 is not a seller's permit. 004 is not a seller's permit. These are old. The 004 was obsoleted 18 years ago. 600 is a business tax registration. This is why we'll see later the 456 is hard coded on the report, because it must be a 456. If it does not begin with a 456, do not report it on that line when we get to it. So we talked about exemptions for the vendors. We have kind of broken this down into 4 categories that we consider 4 main exemptions. There are others, but these are the main 4 ones. And we use these codes on our S240 report, which we'll get to again in a minute. The exemptions are: number 1, vendor sales are all exempt, non-taxable. This could very well be at a farmer's market. They could be selling vegetables, for example, non-taxable goods. It could also be in a case where a party is a display only, or they're not selling product, they're just marketing their business. Exemption 2 is vendor's tax has already been paid by a multi-level marketing company. There's lots of multi-level marketing companies out there. Just to name a few, we could look at Sensi, Pampered Chef, LeBry, that type of thing where there's a seller's representative. The reason why they are exempt from paying Wisconsin sales tax is the marketing company pays the sales tax when they ship the product to the individual. They pay the sales tax directly to the Department of Revenue, and therefore they are tax exempt from the event, because their items have already had tax paid on them. Exemption number 3, not a lot of places qualify for this, but there are quite a few nonprofit organizations, and this specifically has to do with nonprofit organizations. They can qualify for a nonprofit occasional sales exemption, which is up to $50,000 in sales per year, and some other requirements about how often they sell. I would refer you to publication 206 on our website that speaks specifically of this. Exemption 4 is probably the most common one that you're going to see as an event operator. This is exempt under occasional sales tax law. Their sales have to be less than $2,000 per year. Now note, this is retail sales, not profit. A lot of people want to try to consider it profit. Profit is involved in income, not in sales tax. In sales tax, the limit is $2,000 per year, and there are some restrictions on that. For example, if you buy your items wholesale or tax exempt, you cannot claim the occasional sales exemption. Publication 228, which is the temporary event publication on our website, would do a very good job about talking about the occasional exemption. Event operator requirements. So all event operators are required by law to report their events and participating vendors within 10 days of the close of the event. A lot of people think that we just created these laws. These laws have actually been on the books in the state of Wisconsin since the 1960s. Some of the original ones were put there. So this is not a new effort. It is a new effort that we're trying to create equity among vendors, make sure everybody is reporting like they should, and event operators are sending us the information that's required. So we have initiated an educational program that we're working on right now to try to get more compliance from event operators as well as vendors. And in that educational phase, we're looking for voluntary cooperation. To report an event, you can only use the S240 Wisconsin Temporary Event Report. This is a fillable PDF form available on our website. If you click on the link, or there'll be QR codes later you can scan, it'll take you right to it. The S240 itself is a 4-vendor reporting form. There is an S240 alternate that will allow you to report up to 100 vendors. There are no other lists, spreadsheets, or any other way of reporting this that's acceptable. They will be rejected, and it is required that they're filed on an S240, which is a revision 6-22 or later. The current revision is 6-22. We do have one minor change to make to it in the near future, which is not going to really affect much of anything. We'll actually talk about that later. So you can't use old forms. You can't use alternatives. It has to be the S-240 form. By law, there are penalties available for those who choose not to report timely or fail to report individuals. It's $200 for the first offense and $500 for each subsequent offense. As I already stated, we're currently working on an educational and voluntary cooperation. The new S-240 that was released last June looks like this. On page 1, you have Part A and Part B, and down below this, there's some explanations. We'll get to that in a little bit. Here's the link to the form. This is a scannable form. Operators can save the PDF for one event, update event information and vendors on subsequent events, and resubmit them. And the seller's permit is prominent on it because that's very important to us to identify the correct individuals. This is just a quick start guide for those that might be a little bit impatient and want to just get going with it. We do highly recommend you read the S-240 instructions, which are at that link or are available on our website. Most of you are going to want to use the S-240 alternate form, which is up to 100 vendors. You download it to your computer before you make any changes. And then once you save it on your computer, then that can become your record. And that can be reused as many times as you need to. However, you do have to make sure that the information you're submitting is up to date. It is preferred that you do it in all capitals. The form is designed that way, but not all browsers implement that. But if you can, use all capitals. When you're done with the form, we recommend that you print it in a PDF format so that it's black and white PDF format. There's no alternation. You can't make alterations to it. And that's a smaller size that can be submitted to us. The website for uploading the file is listed there. And that's a good way to communicate with us. That's a secure portal. Do not email the forms because there's confidential information in it and email is not secure. Do not fax the forms because the fax alters the size of the transmission. To locate forms and information, go to our website, revenue.wi.gov. That's a good place to always start, is our website. In the upper right corner, there's a search box. And if you put in event operator, the second thing that comes up is DOR event operators. Now that may change, but DOR event operators is what you want to find. And when you do that, you're going to click on that page and it's going to bring up this website for you. And just a couple things to point out on the website. First off, there's information here that explains a lot of what we're talking about today. I do recommend you all sign up for the DOR e-news, which is at that link, or you can go to our website and put in e-news, and a service will come up where you can register to get e-news notifications of many different things. We will send announcements out on that. For example, this webinar was announced on that electronic news. Temporary event operators is the one specifically for temporary events. Many of you may also be involved in sales tax, and that's another sign up on the e-news page, so that's a good place to go. Here's a link to the S-240 form, a link to the instructions, and down at the bottom, insert secure file transmission. These QR codes will take you to the event operator page, the top one, and also to the alternate form. These are scannable in the handout. If you get the handout, you can use the QR code with your phone. Looking at the form in particular, Part A, which is the first starting point. This is information about the event operator. It's very important to us that you include your 640 number. Your 640 number is your event operator account. All of you will be assigned one, especially the first time you submit a report or we identify that you're doing an event. And it's free, there's no charge with it. We record your information there, and this is the best way to get the information directly to your account. The reason why it's circled in red up here is this information automatically fills to pages 2 and 3 when you're using the fillable PDF and appears on all pages that have Part C. So just an example, in the lower right corner, you would fill it out with the 640 number. You must also include an FEIN or your Social Security number. If you're a business or organization, you probably have an FEIN. If you're an individual, you would put in your Social Security number. You do not put both of them in. It's either a business that is the event operator or it's an individual. The event operator, the contact may be different than the event operator. So for example, John Doe is the event, is the contact here and the name that's on this, but his legal business is My Antique Store Business LLC. So the event operator number will be filled in Part A in the upper right corner. It's circled like we saw on the previous screen. All event operators are issued a 15-digit number. The numbering system goes 640, then the 10 digits for the Wisconsin tax number, which identifies the entity, and then the suffix would be the last 2 digits after that. There is no fee for this registration. On Part A only, you may use your 456 sales tax account number or your 600 business tax registration if you don't know your 640 number. However, all you got to do is call us or email us and we will provide the 640 number for you also. So like I mentioned earlier, an event operator is a business, an organization, or an individual. You only report the FEIN or the SSN, not both of them. If you have questions, you can call this number, or you can email dortempevents@wisconsin.gov. Moving on to Part B. Part B talks about the event itself. And you'll have a start date and an end date, the number of vendors. We do ask for vendor booth fees and customer admission fees. This helps us tell what level of event it is and how important, or what the prospective sales are based on the fees that may be charged to the vendors. And this just helps us determine what the vendors may be selling, what their products may be, and so forth. You would record the event name, the street address, and so forth that it's located, sign and date it. You can electronically sign it, or if you're submitting it electronically, you can leave that off or just type your name in there. The event end date, the reason why it's circled in red is that also will automatically feed to page 2, which is the Part C. And Part C can have multiple pages, but that will go to each page, like the Wisconsin tax number that we talked about earlier. Here are some of the instructions that we talked about being on the form. The one in red down here, this is the one change I told you that we may be making shortly to this form. It's a minor change. It's not going to affect anything other than the fact that we cannot have a form faxed. Faxes, current day faxes do not send full page documents. They reduce it about 6 to 7%, which makes the form invalid because the pages have been altered. Reporting repetitive events. Many of you have events that happen, for example, a farmer's market, again, usually happens at least once a week. sometimes twice a week. These events can be reported once monthly. So if you have a report or an event that happens every Saturday, that means that you can file a report using the start date for the first of the month, the end date for the last calendar day of the month, and you can report the vendors that showed up at one of those events. So you only list a vendor once. Do not duplicate them if they were at multiple events. You only record the vendors that showed up at least once during that month in that reporting period. Please note, repetitive events cannot exceed a 1 calendar month period. There in the past, there has been individuals that reported their whole summer activities on one report. That is not acceptable. We need a report once every month at least. We're making a concession for repetitive events because you can have many events in a month and it just kind of clogs the system up. You do still have the option of reporting each event, or you can report once monthly. Now, let's go back to the farmer's market example I said. If the Wednesday event is in the town square and the Saturday morning event is in the parking lot by Piggly Wiggly, these are two different events and they cannot be reported on the same report. They have two unique areas and they have two unique names probably. It could be as simple as Wednesday farmer's market and Saturday farmer's market, but those are two different events. If they are at the same place, the same venue, the same operator, the same name, then there's one event and they could be reported once monthly. Now, the Wednesday event could be reported once monthly and the Saturday event could be reported once monthly. Looking at the S240 again from the earlier screenshots, we showed you these red circles. This is how they populate onto Part C. Part C is where you record the vendor information. You'll notice the 456 is hard-coded in for the seller's permit. Like we talked about earlier, there is no other number prefix other than 456 for the seller's permit. If they do not have a number starting with 456, do not put it in this blank. We need the last 4 digits of their social security number if they're an individual, or of their FEIN if they are a business or an organization. The last 4 digits only. In the upper right corner, you record their exemption code. Business name, contact name. Now, for example, going back to, again, our farm example, sorry about all the farm examples. I guess that's fresh on my mind from doing those webinars. But in the farm example, the business would be located under the legal business name. The daughter that's coming to sell at the market would be under the vendor contact information. Address, phone number, email address, and telephone number. All good ways to reach out to these vendors for us. We appreciate getting all that information in one report. Which vendors need to be reported? Every person or entity that intends to sell or take orders for taxable products and services at the event, regardless of the vendor. It doesn't matter if they actually make sales at the event or not, it's whether they intended to. Whether they're selling taxable or non-taxable goods or services, whether they're a charity or a nonprofit, all of these need to be reported. Minors or retired people, selling items as a hobby. A lot of people that sell things as a hobby like to say they're not in business. They are in business, they're a hobby business. So it's two different classifications, but there is a difference. And also farmers selling produce. Basically, the easiest way is to report everyone that's at your event, because especially if we find out that someone was at the event that's not on your list, then we're going to have to follow up and find out why they're not on your list. Vendor questions. Vendors' questions can be very tough, and they may ask a lot of questions of you. You as the event operator have no liability or responsibility to answer their questions. You can direct them to us at 608-264-4582 or dortempevents@wisconsin.gov. These are questions regarding sales tax collection, whether they should be charging it, not about your event. Questions about your event, obviously, you can answer. But questions about sales tax law and so forth should be sent to the Department of Revenue, and we will answer their questions for them. We can also provide guidance on whether they really need a seller's permit or if they're qualified for an exemption. The best thing for them to do is to review publications 228 about temporary events and publication 201 about Wisconsin sales and use information. They also have their own page on our website. If they go to event vendors, this page will take them to there, and many questions will be answered there. How to submit your reports once you have them completed. The fastest and most secure way is to report it electronically and save the postage. This website is secure and allows you to transmit your files to us in PDF format, and we will receive them. Basically within minutes, we receive them. Do not email, it's not secure, and fax changes the size, so don't do it that way. Mail or through the secure portal are the two acceptable methods. The S-240 is a tax document. As such, you need to treat it as a tax document. Don't use staples, don't use colored paper. Do not cut the pages up into little pieces. They must be intact. They must be full 8.5 by 11 pages, full scale to be processed. Don't put labels on them. I've seen individuals like to put their little return address sticky on for the addresses and so forth. That doesn't work. They need to fill in the boxes. The boxes need to be completed. We prefer you use the fillable PDF, but handwritten forms are acceptable. Again, make them legible. Don't combine events that don't meet the qualifications for the repetitive event. Only file one Part A and Part B, and then as many Part Cs as you need to report the vendors at your event. You can print off as many pages of Part C as you need to complete all operators, but only file one Part A and one Part B. Please use blue or black ink and complete all boxes that are appropriate. One of our tools that we have to use is what's called a request to deny participation letter. We are doing all the work with the vendors. We don't ask you to do any follow-up with vendors, require them to have seller's permits. That's all information for us to take care of and to review. Once in a while, when we run into issues dealing with someone, we may have to issue a request to deny participation letter. This is sent to you as well as the party that we're requesting that you deny participation to. We do this to encourage them to contact us and work out their issues. The letter does not tell you why we are doing this. You just know that there's some reason we need to speak with this vendor and we're trying to reach them. It is acceptable for you to hand them your letter or a copy of your letter and show them that the Wisconsin Department of Revenue needs to speak with them. That is perfectly acceptable. They should contact us to resolve it. They cannot resolve the issue with you. There is a reason why we are doing this, but we can't talk to anybody except for the direct vendor about those issues. When the matter has been cleared up, we will issue a notice to allow participation letter. And that will also go to you and the vendor. We sometimes fax these or email these if the event is close. We can do that. but the issue has to be resolved at that point. And the vendor is the one that has to take care of that. You as the event operator cannot clear this situation. We need to speak to the vendor. So final thoughts. Sign up for the temp event e-news list that we talked about earlier. Here's some QR codes that will take you to different aspects of temporary events, the temporary event publication and the temporary event operator page or home page. We've talked before about its Wisconsin law. Here's the references for you that show you that the Wisconsin statutes specify that this information is provided. And for example, looking at Wisconsin statute 73.03, requires each operator of a swap meet, flea market, craft fair, or similar event as defined by rule to report to the department the name, address, social security number, and if available, the seller's permit for each vendor selling merchandise at the swap meet, flea market, craft fair, or similar event that he or she operates. I'm going to mention that some rumor started years ago that is not true. And that rumor is that if they give you, the vendor gives you the seller's permit number, they do not need to give you the social security number. The social security number is required by law. The seller's permit is desired, and we prefer that. But you'll also notice we have altered what we require as far as social security number, and we only require the last 4 digits of the social security number. So it's very important that we get the full seller's permit number and the last 4 of their social security number at the IN. Here's some references for you that will take you to different aspects of our web pages and different publications that we talked about. Some common question areas are all there. If you have questions, you can call the temporary event program, which is 608-264-4582. That is the same phone number as our sales and use tax with processing area. And you'll reach Sam, Holly, Mandy, Lisa would be your prime contacts. You may reach backup contacts of Rich, Dave, Jackie, Holly, or Kim. I tell you these because I want you to know that you're talking to specific individuals that are doing this job on a day-to-day basis. They are the ones that are handling this. You can get your best information from them. They are ready to take your calls all day long. They process your emails all day long. This is one of their prime responsibilities. They also are the individuals responsible for processing sales tax returns. So they take care of all those issues. My contact information is on the lower left here. Mike Udy, the Section Chief of Business Tax Operations, my email and my phone number. You are free to contact me. I will tell you that I quite often am tied up in meetings and dealing with other things. So I cannot be as responsive to you as the individuals at the temporary event program. If you have generic questions or something about that, please contact them first. The same would go for Kelly Neeson. We're both more than willing to help you, but you're going to get your best help from the temporary event program and the multiple individuals ready to assist you there. But please contact us if you need anything resolved. That's the end of our presentation today. We are going to spend a few minutes, and I'm going to leave this questions page up with the contact information. And we're going to take a look at the questions that you've submitted in the chat. If you give me just a minute here. Okay, so the first question is, if nonprofit is the event or coordinator, do they need to fill out? Looks like it's getting cut off on me a little bit, but I assume they're asking the S-240, and the answer was yes, they do. Everyone is required to fill out the temporary event report. There are no exceptions for filling out the S-240. The difference between an exhibitor and a vendor was also answered. An exhibitor would be somebody basically that's probably display only. They still should be reported as display only so that we know they were at the event. A vendor is someone selling goods. If we have an employee picnic and a mobile food cart is present, does that qualify as a temporary event before we should be required to file the S-240? The food truck is an event that is not a temporary event and does not require the S-240. Food trucks are licensed, they have sales tax permits and so forth. If there were more trucks involved, then we would look at possibly considering the temporary event or other vendors. How do we handle out-of-state vendors? Out-of-state vendors play by the same rules as Wisconsin vendors. There's no exception. Just want to confirm one of these forms will need to be filled out for an event that will have 8 to 9 food trucks, correct? The answer is correct. Just want to confirm one of these forms will need to be filled out for an event that will have, well, that was repeated, or I'm reading it twice. Will we be emailing the slideshow? No, it's available for download in the handout. Our forms filing needed for a nonprofit that hosts an annual golf. If there's no vendors, the answer is no. If there are vendors at the event selling goods, then the answer would be yes. If a vendor does not offer their last 4 social security number or gives an incorrect seller's permit number, do we deny them access to our event or submit them and let the DOR handle those situations? Your responsibility basically ends at the time that you collect the information from them. DOR will follow up with the individuals if the information is wrong. You have very little way of knowing that the information is wrong. What ID a vendor fails to fill out a form? I presume that was supposed to say, what if a vendor fails to fill out a form? You should fill out the form with the best information available. If they're not willing to fill out a form, I would highly consider denying them from the event. What about a concert in the park where a vendor is selling pie to the audience by the slice? The vendors are typically a nonprofit organization. So this is still a temporary event. If there are vendors present and they're selling merchandise, whether it's taxable or non-taxable, that will depend upon the nonprofit organization's status. Nonprofit doesn't mean that they're not responsible for sales tax. They do qualify for a nonprofit sales tax exemption in most cases, but there can be sales tax required depending upon their situation. And yes, it is still a temporary event. So food trucks don't have to be checked at farmers markets. All food trucks are still vendors and should be listed on the S-240.
Mike, I think that that question makes me wonder if somebody may have just got confused by a prior question where they talked about an employee event where they had one food truck. Food trucks, if it's at a temporary event, they all should be reported on the S-240 form. That one question earlier was really specific to, I would say, what we would call a party, not necessarily a temporary event.
I would agree that was a contracted situation where the food truck was there to benefit them. So that's not a temporary event. Thanks, Kelly. If there is an educational event by a group where we are allowing some members to set up informational tables, does that require this form? Go back to the original definition of the S-240. If they are vendors selling goods, selling taxable or non-taxable services, then it would be a temporary event. If they are only displaying and not selling, then that's not a temporary event. So we answered yes. The question really depends upon what is taking place. If there's selling taking place by someone at the event, then it's a temporary event. If they're all just displaying goods like a hiring fair or something along those lines, then it's not a temporary event. If you have vendors that are just food trucks, do you have them fill out the S-240? And the answer, as we've described, is yes. Even if there's multiple food trucks, that's a difference. The other is a catered event. This is a different situation, and multiple food trucks are a temporary event, and they need to fill out the form. So this question says, I'm confused if we have vendors for craft shows and they fill out form, but food trucks don't have to. We explained that food trucks at events like this do have to fill out the form. Only when it's a situation where it's a catered event and the food truck is doing the catering, that's a different type of event. And there's no other selling activity taking place. If it's a craft show and there is selling activity taking place, the food trucks would be reported. So should the vendor submit the S-240 to the municipality or to the DOR? I think there was some confusion on this question. The vendor does not submit the S-240 to the Department of Revenue. The vendor submits the S-240 to the event operator. The event operator submits one consolidated report to the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. Vendors should not send reports to the Department of Revenue, only event operators. Is there a way to look up your Wisconsin tax number? You can go onto my tax account, and there's a process there to look up your sales tax number, but it's the same thing. Your seller's permit number is the same thing as your sales and use tax account, which you report your sales and use taxes on. But you can go to my tax account on the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. You go to our homepage, and underneath the picture of the secretary, there is a little box that says my tax account. If you click on that, it'll take you to the web page, and on the web page, you can then you'll see an option to look up your tax number, or you can call us and we'll give you the information after you've been verified. Just to clarify, if a vendor is a business, not just an individual, are the last four Social Security number required? Or would the last four of the FEIN be appropriate? If the entity is a business, the last four of the FEIN are more appropriate. Only one of them should be reported. Are entertainers at an event also vendors? The answer basically is depending upon how they registered for it. If the event brought in entertainers and they didn't rent a booth space, then they're not a vendor. If they did rent a booth space, then they could be considered a vendor. They would be considered a vendor, I should say. Please also note the taxability of your admission fees changes when you bring in entertainers. Just a comment, the form is set up with 3 vendors per page. Actually, it's not. It's set up with 4 vendors per page. We should avoid this format. It may give other vendors an opportunity to see the other vendors' tax information. The form is not intended for you to give the Part C to the individuals to fill out. The form is designed to be fillable by the event operator in the fillable PDF format. If you want to hand out the Part C, you can hand out the entire page 2 to one vendor, and you can have one vendor fill out one section of Part C. This is going to increase your handling and your postage costs if you mail it, but you can do that. But the intention is that you gather the information from the vendors using your registration documentation, and then it is put into the S-240 form on the fillable PDF. Please note that all forms, even if they're handwritten, must be completely legible. So that responsibility lies with the event operator to make sure the form is legible if it's handwritten. 501c3s and 501c6 are both nonprofits, so both follow the same guidelines. The answer is correct, or that is correct. They are nonprofit organizations. Our nonprofit organization sold hot dogs for a fundraiser. Do we have to fill out the form as a vendor, and do we have to charge and pay sales tax? You most likely do not need to charge and pay sales tax, although heated hot dogs are a taxable item. As a nonprofit, you qualify for the nonprofit sales tax exemption, and you would have to be over $50,000 in the year. Are DBAs required to have an FEIN? The answer is no. DBAs quite often are not a formal business organization and quite often operate as a sole proprietor or a disregarded entity and may only have a social security number. They may not have an FEIN. There is no form for the vendor to fill out. We allow you to use whatever registration information you use to gather the information. Many of them, one of the reasons why this change happened is because many of the event operators are going online with their vendor submissions, and the vendor submissions being submitted online, they don't need a form from us to do that. So again, the intention of the form is that you submit the information that you have gathered. You can use Part C or page 2. Just do not cut it into pieces. Use the full page. You can have one vendor report. It's not recommended because it does increase handling. It does increase your postage, but we can handle one vendor reported per page on page 2. So the question back to the two nonprofit situations, all nonprofits are required to fill out the S-240 as stated, to fill out the S-240 for an event. There are no exceptions on filling out the S-240 if it's a temporary event. We don't have a good way to share the questions afterwards. We'll look into it, but typically we do not share the questions afterwards. You can email any specific questions you have to the DOR temp events at wisconsin.gov or call us. What is the municipality's responsibility in this? That depends upon what the municipality is doing. If the municipality is holding the temporary event, then they would have to file the S-240. If the municipality is not the event operator, then they have no responsibility other than what local requirements are for and local laws state that they need to do. So what if a vendor doesn't want to give us the information? In general, the answer is you're required to submit the information to us that you have available on the vendor. In practicality, if I were personally running a temporary event, which I did for over 12 years, I would not allow them at my event because they are attempting to bypass the law. We will follow up with them as appropriate, but if you as an event operator basically have to make the decision. I personally would not allow them at any event that I have if they refuse to fill out the form because it's required by law. The event operator is required to submit that information. If they're not willing to provide it to you, then that puts you on the hook. The Department of Revenue does not support any importing into Form S-240. There are valid reasons for that, and primarily because they come from multiple sources. Nobody is consistent. It's one of the reasons why we had to eliminate the spreadsheet, is because everybody wants to modify it and go to different forms and submit different information. There is only one acceptable form, and that is the S-240. And as I stated, the Department of Revenue does not support import into that form. However, there is information available. I will supply the PDF field form names to anybody that's interested to do it. And there are parties out there that have successfully imported into the form. You cannot alter the form. You cannot, I have seen people make overlays that go over the top of the form. They don't work. I've seen people alter the form and create their own form. That is not acceptable. You have to use the S-240 form, and you can import into the S-240 form if you have the technical ability to figure it out. There are entities out there that have figured it out. You will probably need the list of field names from me into the fillable PDF. So you can email me and I will get that information, or you can email the DOR temp events and we will make sure to get that information out to you. We do have updates planned for the form in future years when resources that are available to develop it, that I hope will make it much more streamlined online and so forth. But right now, importing is not supported by the Department of Revenue. So We can certainly download the information. We don't have to cut and paste it before it ends. We can download the question forms and send it to you. We'll have to edit it because in some cases they're private conversations that have taken place that we don't want necessarily shared with all. So we can take a look at it. But I mean, all this information is available already on our website. So it's not new information. There's not a question in here that hasn't already been answered in the webinar or on our web pages or in the publication. So I refer you to those documents. Okay, we're at the end of our webinar today. I do appreciate all you being here and the time you've taken. We will continue to answer questions and get the information out to you. But we are going to be closing up here in just a minute. Please email or contact us if you have questions. We also will be running the webinar again on May 10th, 2 p.m. You can refer people to that or sign up again yourself if you want to hear this. We appreciate the opportunity to present this information to you, and everyone have a good day.